Welcome everyone. I'm excited that more than 300 participants from all over the world have joined me in this new edition of Leading in Turbulent Times. Today we focus on corporate strategy, feeding the flames, basically the impact that COVID has on our world and how this drives a revolution in corporate strategy. I have only 3 points to cover with you in the short period that we have together, and 3 main takeaways. One is, I want us to better appreciate where we are relative to each other. What is the situation like? How is our company situated? Under what circumstances does it have to continue to operate and thrive? Then the second one is, COVID is accelerating change that has been going on for a while. And I want to share with you how COVID is feeding the flames of change. Finally, I would like to help with putting at your disposal some ideas on revolutionizing corporate strategy and what it takes. So where are we? Let's compare our current situation with what we are used to. Slowdowns. Usually recessions come as slowdowns where things steadily deteriorate until they become better again. What we are confronted with now is a lockdown where a sudden drop in economic activity brings everything to a halt. And that changes the circumstances under which corporate strategy has to be designed and executed. That brings us to our first poll. I would like to ask you to share with all of you under what circumstances you are working and living right now. So if you were asked to assess the severity of the lockdown in your country from a scale of 1 to 5, very light, very severe, then please join us in doing this right now. So you see that you're a bit all over the place, but the clear majority is under severe lockdown. My heart reaches out to you. This is not easy. And I know that COVID has taken a toll amongst your fellow citizens, family members, and friends. You see that we are in very different situations, in very different circumstances. Our businesses need to operate under very different conditions. How can we get our head around these conditions a little bit more? I've started to think of it in this way. It's a simple model that shows on the horizontal axis the severity of the lockdown, and on the vertical axis the risk associated. And when you look at this graph, it shows that health is influenced by a lockdown. The lockdown can reduce health-related risk. And when we think about the economy, though, the picture changes a bit. A lockdown can increase economic risk. And when we put these two together, we understand why decision makers at country level are struggling with these options that they all have. Should they emphasize health or the economy? How to find the right balance? That is what they're struggling with. What you see here is, on the right-hand side, that a country has chosen for a severe lockdown and taking an economic hit. On the left-hand side, you see that a country has chosen to emphasize economic activity, but takes a higher risk on the health side. And for strategists, especially in multinationals, these things that we've just explained, the different circumstances, matter a lot. Just the other day, the French President Macron has called upon a CEO to meet him in the Élysée Palace to discuss the treatment that this multinational has promised to other countries. So if you're heading a multinational, you may be faced with two different legislations that ask from you to do two different things. And navigating this new scenario is very challenging indeed. The second poll that I would like you to help with is focused on your industry. And the poll asks you, for the situation under slight lockdown, which of these options that you can see displayed applies to you? The second question is, under a neutral lockdown situation, which of these options applies to you? And then under a severe lockdown, which of these options applies to you? So can we open the poll?
So let's have a quick look at the poll results. Can we end the polling and share the results, please? So what we see is otherwise it's too much polling. I looked just with you at the extremes, and the extremes allow us to understand a little bit better what is going on. In the first set, you see those who are living under very light lockdown conditions. You see that for very light lockdown, we have negative effects on both, as the majority closely followed for negative for health, but positive for the industry. And then we have for the neutral condition, so those of you who are in a context where the lockdown is neither very severe nor very light, we see that there the lockdown is positive for health, but negative for your industry. You see the orange bar for lockdown neutral condition. Positive effect for health is there, but negative for your industry. For those under severe lockdown conditions, you experience this as a positive effect for health, but negative effect for the industry. So I think that gives us an indication for how massive the impact is that you experience, and that it is not a clear-cut effect in terms of positive or negative. When we look at where we then find ourselves, where we are in this lockdown economy, we can find ourselves in an intolerable position where the impact on the industry is terrible, and the health benefits are also not forthcoming. We could also find ourselves in the ideal spot where we have positive health impact and we have a positive impact on the industry. So keep in mind that all your industries vary a lot. So in the same economy that has a lockdown or not, you may benefit from positive effects in your industry. So let's move on. After this overview of where we are now, and we can map ourselves now, and we now need to figure out how to move forward ahead, how to get out of this lockdown. How long is this going to take? What is going to happen after this is over? So this is what concerns us moving forward. Lockdowns and the lifting of lockdowns, they have consequences. They help and hurt countries in terms of health and economy. Lockdowns help and hurt not all people and companies in the same way. You've just seen this. Inequalities are exacerbated. So if people don't have equal access to health care, for example, inequality is exacerbated. Lifting helps and hurts countries as well. We had just the sad case of South Korea doing outstandingly well with keeping the virus under control, opening up bars and restaurants, and people who went into some bars came out infected. So the virus can be faster than the economy in coming back. And that is where we all need to be aware and cautious of second waves to come. Lifting has also different consequences for companies. Those that are prepared and able to reinvent themselves for the COVID economy, that is the set that I think you want to be part of. Let's work together on how you can become part of that set. So what are the flames of change that have been burning already? I don't talk about the incorporation of the modern firm. I don't talk about the industrialization and steam engines and so on. But globalization is something that many of us have lived through, and we saw it peak and somehow decline. We saw also that globalization was not happening equally. The world was not entirely flat, as some said, but it was more spiky. Wealth accumulated in some places, the majority of patents was generated in some other places. And so we see that globalization didn't have an equal positive effect for all on the planet. And then we saw the slowdown. The Economist talked of globalization. Over the last year, since 2007, globalization has not been increasing. And you see a couple of figures there. Trade in goods and services has been fairly stagnant. Cross-capital flows have been declining. And especially since some elections, the antagonistic trade stance between China and the US have further slowed down globalization. We also saw that flames of digital technology have been burning for a long time. I've pulled an article from The Guardian that is already 4 years old, telling us that AI is empathized with us. So AI has been coming, like the paperless office, and still we're using paper, and the cloud has been coming, and this is what has all been going on. And COVID is feeding these flames of change. It is accelerating almost everything in terms of impact on the companies. And I've put together, yes, I think by now you're all familiar with the Johns Hopkins database that keeps us in the know of what's going on in terms of COVID. And while this healthcare crisis is going on, it is changing a lot of the context that we took for granted. So COVID changes everything. My colleague and I, Gautam Chalagala, we've discussed this in another webinar. The big shift, travel and trade restrictions, social distancing, self-isolation, working from home, all these things have become common sense over the last couple of months. And this triggers a revolution of the context for corporate strategizing. So COVID helps, an acronym, with changing things faster. In the medical field, suddenly telemedicine is something that institutions and companies start to embrace because they realize the economics and the effectiveness of this. We see that increasing unemployment in the US and the lack of tourists in places like Venice on the picture, as you see, or Paris, are bound to cause tremendous economic problems. And this pressure accelerates change. In some places, COVID accelerates even legal change. In Switzerland, the acceptance of digital signatures on legal documents is suddenly a no-brainer. Even in Japan, where usually stamps are used to sign, that's necessary for a legally binding document, things are moving. So even where things usually don't change quickly, COVID accelerates this. One big change that COVID has brought about is that while during globalization, businessmen were getting all the attention, now it is politicians and their decisions that get a fair share of attention. And then COVID is changing the way we relate to each other. The Black Swan of 2020 by Deloitte and others highlights that supply chains are under severe stress. And the question is, how do you relate with your partners? How good is your partnership actually? And of course, then there is love under lockdown. Separation from loved ones is creating a strain on relationships, but also on health and social well-being. So having looked at these 5 factors, we see that COVID helps or forces corporations and companies to reconsider their strategy, to revise them. And I think that this is a bit of a short list of what we are seeing when we speak with executives and leaders in companies. What was coming is here. So digitalization suddenly happened. What was core is suddenly irrelevant. You see all these empty offices in the centers of cities. What's going to become of them? The virus is here to stay. It's not going away fast. Local, digital, and remote services will be extremely important for many, many corporations. Stakeholders start to rethink their priorities. Politicians may rethink whether they should put the money into health, military, or higher education. You can imagine where I want them to put their money in. Health and higher education. Strategies become obsolete. What worked in the past suddenly doesn't work anymore. We had the greatest store experience. We had the greatest in-store experience. Well, these stores are empty. Strengths may become pointless, and markets and customers may become inaccessible. And for this, we need to rethink corporate strategy. Let me share an example with you, and then I want to open up for questions and chat, and then I want to provide you with a last thrust, if that is okay with you. We have here a classic document that was republished by the Harvard Business Review in 2013, and it shows, as my colleague Todd Zenger points out, the business model of Walt Disney. And you see that everything at the bottom comes down to Disneyland. This is where a lot of money is spent, more than in the movie theaters. This is where a lot of things are being purchased and consumed, and where a lot of fun is had. COVID puts at least a temporary end to this. So Disney Corporation is forced to rethink its corporate strategy to make up for the loss of on-site, face-to-face, immersive experience that everyone loves around the world. So let me take some questions. Let me go, and then I move ahead. So risk severity, it's absolutely, Albert, you ask about the risk and severity. Does it depend on the culture of the country? Yes, what level of stringency is acceptable depends on the country, and how risk taking is appreciated is also culturally influenced. That's why in some write-up I propose that countries' reactions are strongly interdependent with local cultures, and that makes things very, very difficult. To a certain level, economy and health can be put in balance. Yes, I agree. The simple schema that I put up there with health and economic benefits is very simplistic, like most of these models are, but it shows the trade-offs. And I have a session forthcoming that is entitled Winning Trade-offs. So not accepting either or, but going for both and solutions is, I think, very important as a mindset, as a general mindset for strategists. We do have, yes, of course, the slides, everything will be shared, and the video will be shortened by the time that you lost, unfortunately. Our apologies. And yes, the size of countries, Dennis is pointing out that the size of countries, the population density hugely impacts the outcomes of lockdowns, self-isolation, and so on. If you're in a vast country with a small population, then you are almost self-isolating unless you're all huddling together in large cities. So absolutely great question. Yes, interesting. Trust is one new key strength that will become more valued over rhetoric. I fully agree. To what extent is a corporation able to maintain the relationships with its stakeholders and customers? So we know that from times back when Katrina was ravishing the US, we saw that at that time Walmart was providing infrastructure services, provision of goods for the population without financially benefiting from it. And we have seen reports that Amazon is trying to be, according to the FT, the new Red Cross, providing services, but we also saw that they got some issues with safeguarding the level of social distancing within their sites. Would you call this event Black Swan? That's Edgar. That's a great question. I'm sorry, I cannot go through all of your questions during this webinar, but I promise you I'll get back to you as far as the data availability allows. Would I call this a Black Swan? COVID-19 absolutely is no black swan. The epidemiologists knew that the likelihood was always there. There is an excellent video, 5 years old, by Bill Gates, in which he, in a TED Talk, explains that we are not prepared for a new epidemic, and that things should move fast with making the right investments. They haven't been made fully, and this is partly the reason why we are where we are, under mostly, according to you, severe lockdown. So is it premature to assume that, Ventura, thank you, that this is a new normal? That's a great question. Allow me to flip back. I don't like flipping back a lot. Apologies for this. If you see at the bottom right, you see that the number of daily cases is indicated, and you see that after a rise in May, this orange section, after a rise in May here, after a rise in May, we see that the number of daily cases is kind of, unfortunately, stabilizing. And I cannot foresee the future. I don't know what will be the new normal, but I think that people have experienced a different way of life, and they may have changed some behaviors. And this does not only have a huge impact for fast-moving consumer goods companies, but I think that it will also have a massive impact on the professional services firms, on all these people working in the offices. And I think that these new habits will partly be embraced by the corporate world, and others may not so much and may not be so much encouraged. Good. So how do you build trust, maintain a steady stream of compelling offers without interfacing face to face? This is very, very challenging. This is very, very challenging. Partly it depends on what kind of relationship you had before COVID happened. If you had crappy relationships before COVID, and you cannot really help people and build trust right now, then it's going to be difficult to develop trustful relationships. So being mindful of time, I would want to flip forward again. So don't be upset by the moving slides now. Here we go. So what I want you to take away from this one is start testing corporate assumptions. So all customers want the experience we offer. Really? Does everyone want to sit in a concert hall and listen to music again? Or does everyone want to listen to a pop band very close to each other? Is this going to happen? Online DJ sessions in Instagram have been a rave over the lockdown. So I'm not seeing this to go away fully. Face-to-face meetings are always necessary. Really? We have been doing a lot of work here at the IMD with our clients, unfortunately not through face-to-face, but not all of that was less than we would have wanted it to be. Much of the interaction is actually richer because there is more intimacy between participants when they break out and work on projects offline or online. So face-to-face meetings may not always be necessary. And if they are not always necessary, then what about the next assumption? Work in company gets done in and around offices. Is that true? In many, many countries around the world, offices are empty, gathering dust. The work gets done. Commuting is part of work. Maybe, but maybe not so much longer. If we take sustainability and climate issues into consideration as well, skipping the commute has benefits for us, but also others. And so I would want you to question that assumption as well. We need to meet at water coolers. Yeah. Every day? 10 times? So there are many assumptions that can be tested, and technology has shown us a way to deal with many of the things that we weren't expecting to be able to do so well, and we do them okay. The second thing that I want you to take away is, this is a chart by Bain, one of the leading consultancies like McKinsey and BCG, and I hope I named them all. They do a survey asking executives, like many of you, what they use as tools and practices of management. And over the years, from the 2000s until 2017, benchmarking has always a very, very high position in the top 10. Now, there are many positive things that can be said about benchmarking. Many. You see the list popping up in front of your eye. Many positive things about benchmarking, yes. But if benchmarking is looking at what others are doing, if benchmarking is looking at what others are doing, then it may not really help you when you are all together facing an unprecedented change in the environment. You can argue you speed it up and then you have benefits from benchmarking, maybe. But I think originality comes from inside, or comes from the organizational employees and members all pulling together. So that was the second thing. Benchmarking may not be enough. And the third takeaway is you need to focus on innovation initiatives. Innovation initiatives that select markets and segments carefully, that rethinks how to win in new markets. For that, you can map your winning strategy, or you can map business models. You may also want to consider new vehicles of how to tap into markets, local subsidiaries, mergers and acquisitions, alliances. You see how Facebook is seizing this opportunity, buying in India and buying animated picture companies just these days. Network opportunities, internal networking opportunities, breaking the silos, we heard about that. External networking opportunities. So you want to connect with the ecosystem on which you depend, and and which depends on you. So the mutually reinforcing dynamics there are very, very important. You're dependent on your surroundings, and your surroundings depend on your company to do what it does best. Finally, looking for synergies, co-creation with other organizations, sharing and transferring what really works well. So these are the nuts and bolts of corporate strategy. And I want you to follow me one last slide to where I think we can push the boundary a little bit further. Is that okay? Okay. So I think that the COVID economy offers us unprecedented strategic freedom in this crisis, because people are looking for solutions and they're happy if someone experiments safely, yes, not ingesting unsafe liquids or so, experiment safely. Stakeholders will want you to reconsider whether you should focus on profitability or align that with more resilience. A range of stakeholders will want you to make strategic choices that may be at odds with each other. And this gives you freedom to really innovate. Then digital organization. When most of our business communication is no longer using the postal service but email, and now most of our business communication is no longer using email but video conferencing, then the whole setup of organization needs to be rethought. Because the reason why organizations were pooling employees in offices is that it reduces the communication costs. If we can have face-to-face communication via video that is almost as okay as in real life, then I think that a huge chunk of the interactions will move online, and a huge chunk, therefore, of our organization will move online. So we are facing, I think, the dawn of a more digital organization, and we still need to do a lot of research to find out what that is. Structure. Decentralization is possible to an extent that it has never been possible. And at the same time, centralization is possible to an extent that it was never before. Modern technology allow you to connect with your colleagues who are in different positions in the globe, scattered around the globe. But the same technologies also allow a central unit to check what's going on in these scattered devices that are being used by the employees. Consistent chaos, self-organization. I think that more and more companies can no longer rely on command and control structures in vertical hierarchies. This is blown into bits and pieces. This is completely zoomed out. I think what organizations need to learn is to deal with fluid structures where employees can take initiative and pull the rest behind them. So there are plenty of examples for this kind of autonomous way of letting a strategy emerge. My dear colleague Howard, you mentioned in a recent webinar that we did Hire, and the way the micro-organizations within Hire move about. Coordination is at a premium. Coordination of something that is moving autonomously requires a very, very different approach than what corporate bosses who sat for very long at the peak of hierarchies are used to. And rethinking the way new organizational structures can be leveraged to achieve strategic goals is high on the agenda. And having said that, you already know what's coming. This has a lot to do, structure has a lot to do, consistent chaos has a lot to do with culture. In a digital organization where the structures become fluid, what binds people together is, as you said in your question, is trust. So you mentioned trust, and I expanded on a relationship with customers, but the trust within the organization, amongst the employees, that everyone is in it for everyone else. That is a key component. There needs to be a common understanding that everyone is pulling in the right direction for common good. There needs to be a shared purpose. And while that is, it shouldn't become too comfortable. There needs to be some element of competition and some element of mutual stimulus to strive for better and faster. So co-opetition is a wonderful neologism by American colleagues, and it combines collaboration with competition. And finally, organizational cultures that don't offer any care for their members and are not inclusive, I think they will very quickly see that these members go where that is offered in other digital organizations that offer structures just as theirs. So I expanded a bit too long on this. I don't want to miss out on more questions. You have questions and chat a bit mixed up. I focused on the questions early on. Now I see that you have put comments in. Please show the previous slides, the story and graphs. You will get the slides. Commuting, Alvin Toffler wrote Future Shock about moving information and not people. Very, very good comment, Edgar. The classics. I think it's always good to go back to the classics. It's time to think outside the box and reinvent some business models. I think that more and more corporations embrace this idea because they have no choice. Before COVID, it was more like, shall we do this? Shall we not do this? It was Clayton Christensen's dilemma. It was too comfortable to try out something that for a short, medium term promised discomfort. And now everyone is forced to change. And I think if there's anything we have to thank COVID for, it may be this, although the downsides and the death toll clearly speak of this pandemic as something that has really stricken mankind. All right, good. So where are we? I think we have withstood together an audio glitch. I think we have covered quite some ground together. We have a better understanding where we are. How is our lockdown in our country? How is it affecting our industry and the health effect on the population around us? Is this sustainable or is it already desirable? We have discussed that many of the changes that COVID now accelerates have been around for years, decades. The acceleration that COVID brings is not only an acceleration, it has turned change into an impediment. And that requires that corporate strategies, how to select markets, how to win in them, how to gain synergies, need to be reconceived in ways that the old organizational structures have never had to think about. And I encourage you to join me and my colleagues here at the IMD to think together about these future organizations that reach their strategic goals even better, and come join us and learn and conduct research together with us. I want to finally ask you for your takeaway. So if you can jot a couple of words into the takeaway, into the chat function, that would be absolutely fantastic, so that I can see whether you have had something to take away from here. While you're saying this, Loic says that change management is only on the 7th position. Will it go up? Well, it may, especially with the current situation. However, the next results are still to come, and whether they include this period of lockdown is another question. Innovation is back. Alejandro, I think you are right. Co-opetition, yes. Experiment safely, yes. Experience safely. This is very nice. Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much. Albert, get out of the comfort zone. Absolutely. We need to figure out how to survive this all together. And for this, we have to come together and think together and create new solutions together. Great comments. COVID as accelerator. That is very good. All right. Okay. Benchmark what? That is a great question. Yes. Very, very good. Thank you very much for all these takeaways. Thank you again for attending this session. The several hundreds of you, I think we were close to 400. Thank you very much. Stay safe and tune in next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.